Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint podcast. I'm here with TJ, who has kindly agreed to talk about his experiences on the Mandarin Blueprint method course. But before we get into anything related to the course specifically, tell us a little bit about yourself, TJ, and what led you to wanting to learn Chinese.
Okay. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. Having been a part of the Mandarin Blueprint community for a while and watching these and watching so many videos of you and Phil, it feels kind of like meeting a celebrity. It's very strange. I think that's why I was acting so weird when I first signed on.
Yeah.
It's very foreign, for lack of a better term. But thank you so much for doing this for me. I'm excited to contribute in any way that I can. But a little bit about me is, so I am the executive director of the New York Lgbt Chamber of Commerce. I've been the director for about 2 years and involved with the chamber for about 6. So business development and entrepreneurship is like kind of my thing, my bread and butter, and it's what I love to support. How I came across the Mandarin Blueprint method, it's kind of a weird, convoluted story, just like my history, just my career history, which is actually started in human rights and now is in the Chamber of Commerce. But I've always been, I'm originally from Amarillo, Texas. I'm actually wearing a t-shirt,
Oh, nice.
strangely, with it, which is actually where I am for various reasons, which are unfortunate, but I'm currently in Texas. Right. But I've always been a language lover. I grew up learning Spanish because I'm from Texas. But my educational experience with Spanish was very intense and unfortunate, and I just thought I was really bad at it. And when I went to college, I'm also a musician, and I love language and music, and they are, for those that know it, are very similar species of things in the brain. And so I have like a true passion for learning languages, and I just love the process of learning a language, but I was never very good at it. And I went to college and I studied French and Arabic. I lived in Morocco. I studied Icelandic in Iceland.
Wow.
But I was like, I love languages, but I was never good at them. Which was really unfortunate. I never got to a place of proficiency.
You seem pretty good at
but
English.
It never like, so far so good, right? Well played. But it was I've always I've kind of like kept my Spanish up, and over the course of a number of years, kind of ebbed and flowed with it, and still would try every so often. I would never travel to a foreign country unless I learned some of the language. It was just like a rule of thumb for me. But it wasn't until I started getting to like pedagogy of languages and kind of getting obsessed with like different methods that I stumbled across Fluent Forever by Gabriel Weiner, which is a great book, and it kind of like led me down this path of like, the new wave of language learning. And I was like, I wasn't bad at languages, I was just like taught poorly. And I learned that. And so I did my first experiment 2 years ago when I traveled to Germany with that method. And then I used like Steve Kaufman and Idosa Ness of Mimic Method, like all these like different things, and kind of wandered down this path and learned German like really quickly, not proficiently, obviously, because it was just for a vacation. But I had this understanding of like how like languages could be learned, and I'd always wanted to learn like an Asian or Southeast Asian language, and I was really, for like a year was realized like Japanese or Korean or Chinese or the Mandarin. I was really like trying to figure out which one to learn, because I really wanted to like try this method on something. And Chinese was the one that, it was the culture that very like openly would, non-cognitive biases, like I knew the least about. And it was something that I was like, maybe that's something I should like open myself up to. And I started to like dabble in it. And it was so interesting. Like when I first started, I didn't even know how to say ni hao. But I was like, it's they were always saying like musicians, if you're a musician, you would love Mandarin, was kind of like the thing. So I put together like this course for myself to start learning Mandarin at the beginning of the year before COVID and all this stuff. But I'd used all the pieces of everything I learned from like Gabriel Weiner's book, from Steve Kaufman. So I developed this thing, and it started with pronunciation, and then it moved into pronunciation to vocabulary, and vocabulary to like comprehensible input, and then comprehensible input into like, whatever else is out there. And so a week into like my official learning of Chinese, I couldn't figure out the difference between T, T, and G. So
Mhm.
I was looking for a video, and I found this video of Luke explaining the differences between the three.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how I stumbled across the Mandarin Blueprint. And at that point, I discovered like so many different like language tools and classes that I was like, oh gracious, what is this going to be? Let's go take a look at it.
Yeah.
And I discovered you guys, and I was so fired up because I support entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
I was like, oh my God, it's a startup. They're super cool. They really know their shit. And I had to give it a shot, and I haven't looked back. So
Yeah,
long story,
cool.
but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of interesting stuff in that. So yeah, like I mean, so one of the things that struck me is Mandarin is sounds like it's a good language for you to learn with your particular sort of background because I mean, well, China has a lot of good things going for it, but when you mentioned that you were in human rights before, you learning Mandarin might be good, finding some ways to communicate with some people in China and, maybe give them some
Yeah.
new perspectives on certain things. I mean,
Hmm.
at least if they might be involved in a political action. But
Yeah.
so there's that. And then, we live in Chengdu, which is,
Hmm.
in terms of, you know, LGBT presence, Chengdu is like the kind of the capital in terms of like
Hmm.
for China. It's like
I've heard
now
actually.
it's on a spectrum, it's like for China,
Yeah.
so it's still like there. It's kind of interesting. I was on I used to have a different podcast that was with my friend Scott, and we would do every other week in Chinese and every other week in English, and we stopped doing it years ago. But one of the podcasts we had a a guy on who just to talk about his experience of being gay in China. And it was so interesting because
Hmm.
on the one hand, he was saying that like nobody ever hassles him about it, so he's not getting like direct sort of prejudice about it. But on the other hand, it's kind of like that sort of don't ask, don't tell thing. Nobody will also either support him either. It's like we won't chastise you, but we won't support you. And I'm like, all right, yeah. So there's still work to be done, but it's an interesting sort of thing. I think people like you learning Mandarin and who have the experience you have. I mean, that's the thing is like these days China's getting a lot of flack in the Western media, and
Hmm.
some of it's justified, some of it's not the full picture. But
Yeah.
it's like now's the time to learn Mandarin because we all have to be talking to each other and like making sure that we don't let these big institutions completely run the show of what the narrative is in the world, because there's a lot of Chinese people who are
Totally.
just absolutely well worth having a dialogue with everybody in the Western world. There's so many smart Chinese people, and they're learning English, but they tend to be using methods that aren't working very well for like really properly learning English. So like,
Hmm.
hopefully we can, in the Western world, get a lot of people learning Mandarin and, help to fix some of these, the communication does help. I mean, sometimes communication just reveals how we disagree, but on the other hand, it's like you're not going to get there by not communicating. So, um,
Totally. And that's the case with a lot of countries in the world that, are perceived as like, anti-LGBT. I mean, like in politics they are, but like in culture, they often are not as like extreme. And
yeah.
I've learned that throughout my like career. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Is in Chengdu, like they're famous for being, the word is bao rong, and so bao means to like embrace or sort of accept, and then rong means to make room for. So it's sort of a word that means like tolerant, and so it's
Oh,
not
cool.
tolerant and accepting sort of. I mean, it's one of those words that like uh it, and then also Chengdu people are known for being 热情, which is like sort of it literally means hot feeling, which it just means warm and enthusiastic and welcoming. And so,
Oh,
it's
cool.
the kind of thing where I wish more people knew about this part of China, because the places in China that always make the news are either like diplomatic relations or sometimes things from
Hmm.
Beijing. And I lived in Beijing, and Beijing's fine. It's a cool place, and of course there's stuff going on in Shenzhen and Guangzhou and Hong Kong that makes the news a lot. But Chengdu is this like fifth largest city, so it's not quite in the purview. It just became a first tier city, but it's one of those places I wish more people knew about. But anyway, so I digress. But
No, I
so,
love it. I started researching it whenever you guys mentioned that you live there,
yeah.
and that's actually what I discovered, everything that you're saying.
Oh yeah.
So I love that it's backed up by you. And yeah, so it seems like that was like, after learning about it, I was like, oh, I definitely want to visit that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great
I
place.
also am drinking, my like routine is Mandarin and martinis. So I just got poured a martini by my partner, and I'm totally going to drink it while we're having this conversation.
That's fine. Mandarin and Martinis. That's
Yep.
I'm gonna call this podcast Mandarin and Martinis. That sounds like
Please do.
great. All right, nice, nice. So so here's what I'm curious about. You mentioned the process, sort of figuring that stuff out for how you're gonna learn Mandarin. You've got Steve Kaufman in there, Gabriel Weiner. You got this thing that you're thinking about now. But of course, when you come to Mandarin, there's the issue of, you got pronunciation first, and then you get into vocabulary, but you can't really just jump from pronunciation to vocabulary that well in Mandarin. So did you find, that you, at least at first, weren't really sure how to integrate characters into that? And then, or was it more like you found Luke early enough in that video that, we were able to be your Sherpas on that front?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question, because like having done so much research on like the way to do it, one of the reoccurring themes that I would get, because there's so many people like, don't worry about the characters, like you'll be fine, you'll just get around it. But there were like some of the people that I learned to trust in like the linguistic world were like, do not ignore characters, whatever you do not ignore them. So it was kind of like early on, I was kind of like in the process of like learning pinyin. I was like, okay, we need to start figuring out a method for characters, but it was kind of this whole other project. Like it was gonna be pronunciation, and then characters were gonna be like, okay, we'll figure out a way to do it and bring it all together. But there was no like system that I knew of.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, that's kind of what we were trying to do at the beginning, because we realized that that's the main difference with Chinese compared to other languages, is you have to take that into account. And it's, the characters, when people say don't worry about characters, I'm like, it's not so much that I disagree with it on the educational level. I do, but it's not the main point. It's like, the main point for me is that that's what makes Chinese interesting, and that's what changes your brain, is that the way that they put together the words is based on, I mean, we do it in English based on syllables and the, Roman alphabet, and that's fine. It's a very efficient system in certain ways. But what happens when you change the sort of fundamental building blocks of the language is that where you draw the line conceptually between different, either objects or concepts, or the actions, the way people interact, or how a story is told, it just naturally creates a better ability to categorize things, I would say. And so like, it's like,
Totally.
or at least gives you another perspective on how you could categorize things. So all the time with Chinese, I guess what I've noticed since I've learned Chinese is that whenever I'm analyzing a problem, it's easier for me to see an alternative way of looking at it. And I think it's not like a conscious process necessarily, but it's just sort of naturally what happens. And if you don't learn the characters, then you're kind of missing out on that. I mean, I guess people are saying maybe you could learn them later, but the problem with that is that then you've got all these homophones, and you're just sort of repeating these sounds, and you're not really getting any relationship to why it's these sounds. And characters
Yeah.
are so fun. So you're about 130 characters or so into the course. What's your experience so far of learning characters in general? Not specifically with the Mandarin Blueprint method or the Henza movie method, but like, what's your feeling about like how Chinese characters work? Or, I know it's kind of early, but like, what are your thoughts about it so far?
So you like in the beginning stages, or the videos, you mention that like characters are super important, and kind of like, just don't worry about it, just go with it. You'll get it along the way. And I think that's kind of like what I've learned. And I trusted the method. I just kind of like, because it was something new that I never done, so I just kind of trusted it. And I think that's the thing. And what you're saying is very true. Like getting to focus on characters along with it. One, helps your brain like cling on to something other than just sound, which I think is super important in the process. But also, it kind of reorganizes your brain in a great way. And I feel like getting to learn characters, it allowed, because one of my biggest mistakes learning languages in the past was I would be so pumped, and I would like vocabulary, and then I would like open a grammar book and be like, wow, I hate this. so much.
Yeah.
And I just hate it so much. And as someone who loves languages, like that was so disappointing. But I was like, well, I mean, if this is languages, I guess I just don't want to do it. But this, like, learning characters allowed my brain to just kind of like be like, you know what, that probably doesn't work the same. So just learn it and just go with it, hold on to it, and it'll come across your table again, and then you'll probably use it. So it was like a kind of a freeing sense.
That is a great attitude to have, because one of the things that happens is, you know, it's so natural for people to want to go like, but I don't totally understand why this is. And I get it. Like, you see a sentence and you go, why is it structured this way?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it's totally reasonable, but the idea that you're never going to come across it again is kind of crazy if you think about it. It's like, of course you're going to see this
Totally.
again. So it's like, to some degree, letting go of that desire for perfection in the moment is way better in the long run, because you're going to just keep coming across this. This past week, I was speaking a lot of Chinese in various different situations, because I happen to be traveling with 6 other foreign friends, and my Chinese was probably the best out of everybody. So like, I was kind of doing a lot of the organizing and lots of sort of asking people, hey, where should we go for this and whatever. And just, by the way, traveling in China is just so much easier when you know Chinese, because Chinese people are so
Oh yeah, I
like
bet.
thrilled that you know Chinese, that they're usually like so happy to help. But that's a side
Yeah.
point. But one of the things that happens is that I'm reading all the time, I'm reading new things, and you just start saying stuff that you didn't know you knew. Like, you sort of like express something in a certain way. You're like, oh, I didn't know I could express that, but it came out when the time came. And if I had spent all that time just being like, oh, I must get this exactly perfect, then I would never speak. I would never be willing to open my mouth, because I'd be too afraid of making a mistake. And so in the same way, you have to just be like willing to go, okay, I trust my brain, I trust my unconscious to be my guide, so long as I just keep going. Because it's much, think about it practically. If you have 10 minutes and you're reading, and you stop for one sentence to try to really understand why it's structured the way it is, how long does that take? Does it take a minute? Does it take 2 minutes? And then you figure it out. Well, how many more sentences could you have read during that 2 minutes? And then how many more would that have made it over the 10-minute period? And what's going to be more effective in the long run? I mean, it's just so that to me is a huge part of it, because grammar points, we're adults, we can conceptualize it. We can go, oh, I see how this works. But we have to remember that it's always, maybe 2% of your time you should spend on that. Like 98%
Oh my
of it
gosh.
should be spent on input and just getting more input.
Totally. In that respect to the community, I feel like one of the things I would see in like the dialogues beneath videos would people would start asking a lot of questions like, my Chinese friend said this, and my tutor said this. And there's like this, because I am that type of person too. But there's that sense of like, no, don't do that. Like, they're probably from a certain place that says it differently. And like, there's so many variables. Like, just go with the flow, man. Just go with the flow.
Yeah, exactly. And that's definitely helped. And then, also, I mean, on a practical, or sorry, on a sort of more like philosophical level with that, you could read some Taoist texts once you get even a little bit proficient in Chinese, because the Tao Te Ching is not even that difficult. It's like not that difficult of a book to read. And so you could read that, and that would teach you a lot about going with the flow, of course. So,
Oh, that's
we're
cool.
we're in the capital of Taoism here in Chengdu, which is, it was funny.
That's right. Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was saying, I was mentioning, he was, being somewhat critical of Chinese culture, and I was fine with that. Be critical if you want. But one of the things he was saying was, they have a history of like, sort of succumbing to their governments, or like sort of, which I disagree with. But he was saying that, I was like, well, why not focus on these aspects of the culture, like say the Taoist aspect of the culture? And he's like, well, how many Taoists are there these days? And it's like, there's not many like dyed in the wool, I'm a Taoist people, but to the influence of something like Taoism, for example, or Buddhism in the culture shows up in the language itself. Like, there's so many things that are said that come from concepts. It's like saying
Oh my gosh.
that
Yeah.
Americans who aren't Christians are unaffected by Christian culture. It's like, of course
Took
they
the
are.
words out of my mouth.
Like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like
You say bless you when someone sneezes. Like, come on.
right, exactly, yeah. And there's so many there's so much sort of wisdom packed into these idioms. Like, idioms are really fun to learn once you've gotten beyond the basics, because they can pack so much wisdom in just 4 characters. and it's just coming
Mm-hmm.
up all the time, every day. So it's so much that you couldn't possibly understand how much it influences your day-to-day thoughts. So that's why, when I think about how Chinese people are behaving on a day-to-day basis, of course they may not say I'm a Taoist. Actually, like 95% of the country says they're non-religious, but it's still like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't change the fact that it's part of the day-to-day experience. So anyway,
Totally.
it's just fun
No,
sort of
I
like
love that.
talking through this various stuff. So okay, so let's talk about what would happen if for you, and what you might do if you are to be successful with being able to speak Chinese. So like what are your plans? What would you hope to, what's the dream in your mind of, okay, I can speak Mandarin now, or I can read Mandarin now, or hopefully both, and what would you do with that?
Um, so it when I started learning Arabic when I was in college, I learned it because I started as a performance arts major, and I had a scholarship, and I was like, I hated it, and I left it, and I went on a journey of my own, and it was a linguistic journey. And the first Arabic teacher I ever had asked me, like, why are you learning Arabic? And I said, I don't know, because it sounds really cool, and I think I'm really going to enjoy it. And he was like, then it is going to take you places that you never thought. And that is how I ended up like living in Morocco and then ultimately Iceland and studying and doing all that cool stuff. And Chinese was kind of like that same thing. I was very selected. I chose it for a reason, but it also had this sense of mystery and openness, and because I don't have any assumptions with it, I don't have a lot of context, literally besides like Chinese food. Like it was a very like open portal, and everything I learn is like this new page that I get to unfold. So so that's like part of the dream, is like finding something that I love so much, that's so exciting, and every day is a new adventure. But I've also, having like studied and lived abroad, I do have like a dream of getting to work abroad and
Mhm.
getting to like take my career to another place in the world, and learning that, because it was something before the Chamber of Commerce. My world was international human rights and international education.
Mhm.
I was a program officer for international Fulbright scholars for a while. So I always had like a trajectory to do like an international based job.
Mhm.
But I fell in love on accident with my job that I took part time, and then progressed in my career to become executive director. So
Right.
I think that's what ultimately what it would look like, is being able to like take what I've learned and like be able to travel and live and work abroad.
Yeah, nice. I mean, obviously that's a good, if you have that as a goal, then it's that, because you always want to find your like sort of underlying goal, like and
Hmm.
break it down as far as you can, and that one's definitely a fuel provider, or something that'll keep you going on the
Yeah.
day to day. Because there's no way to on any kind of like 2-year project to feel like super excited every single day about what you're doing. So you need the deeper goal that keeps you going even on the days when you're not feeling it as much, because it's
Oh my
just
God, you said
impossible
it.
to be
Yeah.
enthusiastic all the time. I mean, that'd be great, but like that's I don't even think the Buddha figured that one out. So it's like, there's a lot of
Totally.
yeah, you need something deeper. And like I always say, drill down, keep asking the question, like, uh, why am I going to learn Chinese? Well, it'll help with my career. Okay. Well, why do you want your career to go better? Because, well, then I'll make more money. All right. So what would making more money do? And just keep asking the question until you eventually get to,
Hmm.
if you keep going down the series of questions, what you eventually get to is like, so that I can lead a happier and more helpful life for my loved ones and for myself and for the people around me, my family, all that. It all ends up coming down to that. And so like, if you can kind of follow the steps from the big goal, like I want to be a good partner, son, friend, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
then take it from the large goal and then make it actionable into, that means I'm going to learn
Hmm.
this component today. Then that'll keep you, anybody who does that keeps the motivation, day to day. And then eventually it becomes self perpetuating, because once you know enough characters and you know enough words, and you go, oh, I can do this. And then it's sort of, you don't even need the deeper motivation anymore, because the momentum does it on its own. Um,
Totally. I totally agree with that.
yeah, cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the course then. So we have the Hansa movie method, which is, you know, um, a little bit wild when people have never heard of it before, because it's sort of this mnemonic system. So had you ever used mnemonics before to try to learn things or, learn languages in any way?
Yeah, it was something I stumbled across a few times in, like the memory champion things that y'all had mentioned. I'd like heard about it before, and I just started to my constantly rekindling romance with Spanish was something that I was starting to play with, was the mnemonics as an option. um, but yours was very different and very interesting, and I definitely had my hesitations. I was like, what is this? What could it be? But it made sense because having like a little bit of knowledge of it, I was like, okay, that makes sense. I just don't understand it yet.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely, some people find it really weird that occasionally we get somebody who already knew about the idea and they're happy that it's systemized. But yeah, so uh, then
Totally.
I guess how long did you go into it before you felt comfortable? Like, so, obviously the first just like 10 characters or so, it's all new, everything, you're trying to figure it out. But at what point did you feel like, how many characters in did you feel like you had a good grasp of the system?
um Probably like halfway to where I'm at. Well, no, like 30 in or so.
Hmm.
I think like I got the flow, but it was still like I had to really focus on it and like build a story. I was definitely someone that I didn't think I was like a imaginative person. I know people say that all the time. So I was like, oof, this is gonna be real tough. And I think like 30 in, I was like, okay, so there's a system to this.
Yeah.
And your videos along the way would kind of like coax it out and be like, don't focus on it too much. Like you'll
Yeah. Yeah.
revisit it in Anki, like
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
finesse the story. And every time I had a question about that, a video would come along and be like, don't worry, Anki will remind you to like finesse your story.
Yeah. That's one of the reliefs when you realize, oh, okay, I can just sort of rely on the flashcards to help with that. So
Oh
yeah, so
man,
like
yeah.
that. Okay, so 30 characters, right? So what that means is that at the moment Mandarin Blueprint goes to 1,530 characters, which means that even just in the Mandarin Blueprint method, you've got 1,500 characters that you'll learn knowing how to learn them, right? So it's like
Yeah.
because one of the biggest sort of maybe objections to using mnemonics is, well, what I have to learn all this other stuff to learn the language. Like I have to learn about how to imagine my uncle shaving a ferret in the bathroom. Like what's going on here?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
understandable, but it's like uh, when you think about it from the perspective of the sheer number of characters you need to learn, and really you should learn about twice as many of that if you want to be able to read the newspaper and read novels and stuff. So let's say it's
Yeah.
3,000 characters. So 2,970 characters that are learned with a clear system that's you understand how to use. And it only takes 30 characters to
Mm,
get there. So like, if there were only 100 characters to learn in Chinese, I would say, just force them into your head, write them over and over, and then you'll get it. Which maybe you should do
yeah.
with something like Korean. But like when it comes to Chinese, it's just not going to stick. And then so what you're going to have is the leaky
Totally.
bucket thing where it's like you're trying to get to 3,000 characters, but you keep losing 10 characters a day, and so you're trying to like gain maybe 12 characters. Oh, it's just so inefficient, right? And
Oh my
so
God. Yeah.
that's good to hear that it takes about 30 characters, and then you can just think about it like if it's 30 characters to learn the system, and then you've got 2,970 to go, it's worth it. It's going to save you a lot of time. So
Oh,
yeah.
totally. And shout out to the beginners. Like at 30, you get the method, and then 90, you like really start to get under your belt. And like where I'm at now, I'm just getting to the point where it's like video, thinking about it 10 seconds, move past it. And now it's like it's starting to roll a lot faster.
Yeah.
And the only reason I'm not just scrolling through all of them is that for me, Anki is my barometer.
Hmm.
And I will not allow like getting to the congratulations you completed
Hmm.
is like my daily goal.
Yep.
So I like refuse to let it be the Anki become like a tedium for me.
Good.
So
Good. Yeah.
only learning enough, because that's my reminder thing. So and I like there it's strange how suddenly like you forget one of your first character, like one of your first actors, and you're like, I
Mhm.
never thought I was going to forget that, but you do. And so very quickly I learned like don't get in over your head, just like slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, what's nice about mnemonics is that suppose you do forget like an actor to represent a pinyin initial. I think it was one of the guys who finished our course, William Edmedes, a guy from New Zealand, programmer. He
Hmm.
said it's like a brick falls off the house, but you can just put it back on. Like it's not like
I
you're holding
listened to that one.
this
Yeah.
idea. Yeah. Oh yeah. Cool. Great. Yeah. So that was a good analogy, I thought, because when you rote learn, it all falls away if you forgot something. It's like, oh, I completely forgot this character, so you got to start from scratch. Whereas if you forget just one actor, I mean, like, okay, so you forgot that it was Gary Oldman. Well, maybe you should change it to somebody else. If Gary Oldman didn't stick, you can either switch, or you can just go, oh, okay, let me just add a few more details, make it Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill or something like that, or as Sirius Black or whatever, and then that maybe makes it clearer. And then just as so yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool, nice. So you're basically saying at this point, learning a new character, I mean, obviously it varies, but it sounds like on average you're getting through it pretty quickly, as little as 10 seconds, maybe, up to 30 seconds or something.
Yeah.
And then, obviously occasionally you'll run into a character that's a weird keyword and you have to go, okay. But what's so great is that, and this is something that Luke and I didn't really, I mean, I guess we sort of guessed that this might happen, but we're so pleased at how many people are giving their stories in the comments and sharing their scenes. It's good. So that's
so
really
helpful
to us too, because we learned from remembering the simplified Hanzi by James Heisig, which doesn't have a pronunciation mnemonic system, and also it has his suggestions, which come from a fella who studied in the 70s and put this thing together, and a lot of his references are from his generation, and so it doesn't necessarily follow, and there's no comments, it's just a book, so it's like you can't look at how somebody else interpreted it. And a lot of people leave comments that are references to media or stories that I've never heard of, so that's like, I'm like, great, perfect, because that doesn't so
I really brushed past those at the very beginning, and I was like, I don't want to hear other people's opinions. That sounds terrible. Everybody in the community, I'm sorry, I didn't mean like that, but I kind of brushed through them. But there was a point later on, and I started to scroll through and read some, and I was like, the little details, it would just be like, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly what my actor should do. And it really helped finesse the story. And now I won't skip past a character without reading a few of the stories beneath. It's super important, even for a little detail that helps it really stick. It's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of, what is the what is your experience of the community aspect of the course? The fact that there's the comments, and of course there's the forum and all that. How's that been going for you so far? Because we're really trying to facilitate that.
Yeah, no, it's been surprising. So that description is actually how I've approached the community generally. I was like, community forum, oh, that's cool, whatever. And then as I started to read more of the comments underneath in the stories, which would inspire some of my ideas, and then questions people would ask, and then I would start to say oh my God, great idea, thank you, to certain comments. And then I started to contribute, and then when people would reach out comment, it was oh my God, wait, someone listened to me. And it was really exciting. And all of a sudden, the idea of the little email you get, or the prompt you get from a Kajabi on your phone, someone commented on your thing. I was like, oh my God, wait, someone's listening to me. This is so exciting. And so I got bold enough that I was like, okay, I'll offer a piece of, I think one of the first things I did that was big was Anki's really expensive on iPhones. So I was like, anybody that's really concerned, I didn't buy it for a whole month because it was way too expensive. I only did my laptops. You should do it. If anybody has any concerns. But that became a whole forum of people providing insights and advice. And then I learned how to do the sketchpad on the phone, which was, I never had a pen and paper around. So I learned how to do sketchpad from some guy who's, if you're listening, man, thank you for that. That was really cool. Nice. But things like that, you just never know what you're going to get if you kind of just delve into the community a bit.
Yeah, that's been one of those things that Luke and I are just thrilled about, because we didn't anticipate that, but it's and also we're grateful to Kajabi, because they made we host the course on Kajabi, and so they made this community forum feature that we just sort of started one day. We were just like, oh, let's see what this happens, and it's been great so far. People are really engaged, so that's it's weird because we just put this thing together and we're like, people will probably just ignore us, right? So it's cool to see people getting so engaged with the whole thing. So that's a thrill for sure. Awesome. So okay, so let's talk about as you were going through, if you could, I mean, I know this might be a little bit tricky to do, but if you can sort of narrow down what you've experienced so far to sort of three aspects that kind of stick out to you as what has been helpful, or sort of had the biggest impact on you of the course, what would you say those three things are?
We got three things.
Or, whatever. I mean, we got to pick a number. So
no, that's great. So my biggest like takeaways so far.
Yeah, or just things that you found helpful, or like whatever, however you want to respond to it. But you sort of like,
Okay.
we got pronunciation mastery, we got phase 1 of the course with the characters and components, phase 2 with the words, and now you're into phase 3 with some sentences and all that.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
you guys basically assembled and monetized and produced what I thought was going to be like in my mind a perfect course that I was creating myself. I was like, oh my God, it's the same system of pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, comprehensible input. And so stumbling across, it was like, it's the thing, and I think that being the thing, and it's like the new wave of language learning. I feel like you guys have like, you put together a program that is the new wave of
Mm.
language learning for what is the most difficult language
Hmm.
in the world or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of my biggest takeaways. One of my other biggest takeaways, one of my biggest like things, is the idea of spatial repetition, space
Hmm.
repetition.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Anki, which I had only started experience with the German and the Spanish that I'd done previously, but oh my gosh, I did not realize that's how my brain worked.
Yeah.
And when you guys say like, do your Anki every day,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
it is so crucial.
Yeah.
It became like, especially during quarantine, this is kind of like a bleak note, but like I do Anki every single day. And it is a part of my day. It is a part of my regimen. I'm one of those people, like if I have a spare moment, I don't get on Instagram if I haven't finished my Anki
Right.
deck,
Yeah.
and I do it
Good.
every day. And yeah, and it's like I've never missed a day. There was like 2 days where I didn't complete it fully, but I at least did it. But and and I think that's such an important part, because you don't know what you're going to forget. And just knowing that it's like it's back there somewhere, is, as like someone who loves learning languages, knowing that it's back there is so comforting.
Hmm.
And for all those people, this is very bleak moment, serious moment, for all those people that like don't feel like they can fit in their day. So unfortunately, I'm in Texas because my mother passed away very suddenly, and
I'm
it
sorry to
was
hear
very
that.
terrible. No, thank you. But Anki, actually, throughout this, it's been a number of weeks now, and I'm still here. But Anki has, like, because I've been doing it every day, that became like a really source of something solid for me in like a lot of turmoil and like chaos, and I didn't understand. Like Anki was something. This sounds so weird. It was a place I could go by myself, and I could just like focus on something that I really loved. I got to think about like flirting with Bruce Willis, and thinking about Amy Winehouse attacking Doctor Who with a Thor's hammer. Like
Yeah.
those things they brought me like a little bit of joy. And like there's, I think that's one of my biggest things, is like really just doing it every day is something really special. And
Yeah.
watching your videos very early on about just like really just do it every day. Just think about it. Here's some systems, relate it to this, associate it with like your morning coffee. Um, yeah, and it makes me realize like you can do anything if you like
Yeah.
working out or playing piano, whatever, if you just like a little bit every day.
Yeah. Learning can definitely be a a way to kind of just a, sort of a solace in hard times, or something that's a rock, or a consistency that you have, and it always feels good that you did it, even if it maybe,
Hmm.
sometimes maybe you have to rev the engine up to get it going in the first place, but sometimes you're just willing to get into it. And it can definitely, that's not weird to me at all. Actually, that makes sense, because learning is something that, yeah, you're always going to feel good about it, and then that
Hmm.
at least you have that in your day, no matter what else is going on. So
Totally.
so that's
Totally.
that. I'm glad to hear that. That's the when you go through tough times, having that little thing is definitely helpful. So
Hmm.
and that's good to hear, that's had that impact in your life. So let's talk about what you were skeptical about, because this is a weird course. It's definitely not traditional. So was there anything you were skeptical about at the beginning, or sort of did you think some of were you one of those people who were like, I don't know about learning Chinese from these guys, they don't look Chinese?
uh, no, in the exact opposite. It was the first time I had like met or like seen some people that I was like, okay, these guys like seem like they've got something. And it's the first time. I'm not a good team player. I don't follow directions well, and authority stresses me out. So you were like the first program that I was like, I'm gonna trust the system. But I think my biggest skepticism was like, and I've heard this from a number of people, I was like, even as a musician and like a creative, I was like, my imagination is like not good for this. And I would stress out about the perfect set and the perfect actor and like, oh my God, this is crazy. I don't think I can do like that's what I was most skeptical about.
Mhm.
Um, and then like you had so many like encouraging words in the videos along the way that was just like, just if you know them well, just like get it out there. Just
Yeah.
get it out there and just move along.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you remedied my skepticism about like not being imaginative enough, or like, is this space really memorable? Like, did I conceive my first child in this space? Like,
Yeah.
for some reason, that was like every set was
Everything has
supposed to
to
be
be
that.
so emotionally impactful that you're like, this was a life-changing moment in this room. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be quite that impactful. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I would imagine things that happen in Sports Authority in Montgomeryville, Pennsylvania, and just because I went there a few times as a kid, like probably went there a total of 20 times, but I can remember the place and I can remember being in there and like buying cleats and stuff like that. So it
Totally.
doesn't have to be too super impactful.
Yeah. The shitty gay bar in New York City that I love to go to, like, I did not think that was going to be such a great reference for memory and
Mhm.
for characters.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah. So it's pretty. That's not surprising that you would have felt skeptical about that at the beginning. But yeah, it's mnemonics are. It's well, I'm more amazed at how easy it is to remember. One of the things that it pointed out to me when I was first doing it was just how easy it is to remember people and places from my past and like just imagining myself there. I could have gone to a place once. I can remember all the places I was last week in Tiger Leaping Gorge and in Dali that I have never been to before, but I can just easily imagine myself there now. And
I
then once you go back there in your memory palace and you're solidifying your memory of the place, and so then even if I just decide tomorrow that I'm going to use the Airbnb we stayed at as a mnemonic palace for one of my things that I'm doing, I'll remember it forever. I'll probably remember it forever anyway because it was a good vacation with some friends. But like if I went back into it a few times, then there's definitely no way that I'll forget it. And then it just serves as a useful tool. It's like I can use lots of things to relate to that place that we just went. And that's just a place I went for 5 days, right? So it's like,
no, totally. It's amazing because I feel like you get to have like a new reference point to a place that, even if it's like somewhere you've been to for a second that you really liked, or if it's like a very like historically memorable place for you, like
mhm,
getting to be in my hometown and traveling around, a lot of these places that I've been getting to drive by are places that are my memory palace. And it's really fun to like see my like high school theater and like drive past it and like
yeah,
have these new like memories. And it feels like all those memories kind of like collapse and like sink and just like sink in a little bit farther, like getting to see it in person. Because then like those little details of like the way the sign looks now, like it sticks in the way that my actors get to relate to those things in my memory and in the characters.
yeah,
It's rad.
yeah, fantastic. It's really enjoyable. You can kind of get this like take this little waltz through your past experiences and remind yourself of these cool things that happen. And I've had moments where I was doing characters or learning something, and it reminded me of a person. And I called him up and it's like, hey, how you doing? So it's it can even
Totally.
affecting your real life. So that happens too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, cool, awesome. So, I wanted to mention this just because we've been talking about Anki and SRS, and this is still in the works. But in case anybody's listening to this in the future, we're still figuring out how we're going to do it technically, but we may be getting rid of Anki and switching to using Skritter as our
Oh,
flashcard app. So, you ever
wow.
heard of Skritter before?
I brushed brushed past it. I don't know much
Yeah.
about it though.
Yeah, and so we're working on it, but I just in case somebody's listening in the future and they're like,
Wow.
"Where's Anki as a part of this?" It's because Anki, we love it, but it's the biggest thing that we know we could improve about the course is getting a more user friendly flashcard system because Anki, as much as it's so great, but it's so awful at the same time. Like
Oh
it's
my God.
yeah,
I totally agree. It's so good, but I had like experience with like the other book and languages that I learned, so I got to like tough my way through it. So doing it with you guys was like at least a little broad sense, but you guys do so good at explaining what is essentially like a tough app to wrap your head around.
yeah, and so we were just chatting with Jake Gill from Skritter last week, and we're working on a way that we might be able to sort of bundle the two things together and use flashcards that way, which would at least be a lot easier to use than Anki. So we'll see how that goes. But so Anki aside, and that the user unfriendliness of that app,
I love it, so it's fine.
yeah. Do you have any suggestions for how we could improve the course, or sort of, things that, you maybe want to see more of, see less of, these types of things?
It's so interesting. So being a person that like professionally works with entrepreneurs, it's been really fun, especially the past, I guess it's been like 6 months now, like working with you guys, seeing you evolve and change. So it's hard to say, because I feel like every time I think, oof, you should maybe change this, I feel like you adjust and change. And I really admire the way that you're keeping your users and students like engaged in understanding what you're changing. And I just noticed like last week, for those in the future, that you do like a sample course now.
Yeah, we have several. Yeah, we're looking into that. Yeah, like sample courses.
There's like I noticed on the homepage, like it changed like last week, and all of a sudden there was like a new thing to choose from on the homepage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
the rapid acquisition course. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
And that's really exciting. Like I love to see that you're constantly growing and changing. And I think it's hard to nail down something I would love to see more, because I love to see you guys like what is working, what is not working. And it's you're always evolving, which I think is the most important. So I guess my biggest piece of advice is to continue to evolve. Mm-hmm. I'm really excited to see I know you've made some changes to phase 4. Yep. So like I'm desperately trying to get through, because I want to see the changes that you made so bad. Yeah. Even though they wouldn't be changes to me, because they're all different now. Yeah. But I think there was a point where you started to say like you weren't going to see videos, and
now there are a lot of videos.
Exactly. And I love that. I love it, because there was a point that I was like, do I want to watch this video? Like, do I need to watch the video? And honestly, every video was just like a moment for me, even if I wasn't like totally tuned in, to be like thinking about my actors and set, and then maybe like pick up on something that you guys said. And I think that's super important. So I'm glad that I would say continue with the videos, whether or not people watch them. I think it's great to have a reference point.
Oh yeah, I think by phase 3, people know that if they want to skip the video, it's fine. But like, it's just fun to, for us to use the podcast as a way to create new content, and also like kind of just get the people involved in the course. So it's like anytime you see a lesson that doesn't have a video, that means that your content your contribution could end up becoming real course content, that's what is so cool. It makes Mandarin Blueprint a living course. It's always changing, constantly updating. Every week we get our video editor sends us all the different sort of clips from the podcast that could go into the course, and we check them out and approve them. And it's just like, it's great to know that we're always building that stuff up. And we're working on more longer form content at the moment in the intermediate course. And like, it's such a fun process, because we know that everything that we're doing is genuinely helping people learn Mandarin. So, and at the moment we're working on outreach to different language learning companies and all that. And so hopefully we just, all our goal is to just try to keep it up, keep it going, make sure that we have new content all the time, and also just get this in front of new people in different ways. We're not sort of online marketers, right? So we have to kind of figure out ways to sell things online, which is kind of tricky. And, I'm sure we've made some missteps over the years, but the main thing that kind of keeps us going is just to remember that, first of all, you always have to listen to people. You always have to listen to their feedback and what they're struggling with. Like, you can't ever think like, on the one hand, we know that people don't know how to learn Chinese. So it's like some feedback we take in and we understand. We have to interpret it and then see how, but like, there's almost no feedback that means don't do anything. Sometimes it's sometimes the feedback is, shouldn't it be this? And we know, okay, it shouldn't be that. But the fact that you think it should be that means that maybe we should add something, before or whatever. So it's like, there's totally. It's really important to constantly do that and constantly be changing. So yeah,
I think that's actually like the only advice I would have, is because I love that you guys are like more than teachers. Y'all are real people, and you don't just, so many like courses I've taken online, there's such a rigor about the teachers, And you guys really talk about the fact that it's a startup, and that it's, that you are creating something that's never been done before, and you're like really trying to go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really exciting, because I think I guess me and my job, but like I think we as viewers also see, like, we know where you're at, and people get to see like how they can help you. And I'm sure that a lot of people along the way have like provided insight that has allowed you to propel professionally in your business. And I think that's like the most exciting. I would love to be able to, yeah.
It's
Like the biggest thing I would like be able to contribute as someone that like works in the Chamber of Commerce is like, have you like thought about reaching out to corporations and being like the sole person, the sole company to be able to provide Chinese education, or reaching out to the Pan-Asian Chambers of Commerce around the world that, because people want people that don't speak Chinese get into those, or Mandarin, get into those groups to try to like get a feel for it. And, there's that's my biggest thing is like, I want to know where you're like putting your tendrils.
Oh yeah, that's oh gosh, it's like there's so many different avenues we could take, and we would really like to get more into that. One of the things we're going to do soon is we're going to start offering the course. At the moment it's mostly a subscription service, and you can buy pronunciation mastery one-off, but the Mandarin Blueprint method is just subscription. But we're thinking of breaking out the phases into individual purchases as well. So like, you can get the subscription that'll get you access to everything, and then you're paying a monthly fee that's like considerably lower. Or you could just say, I'll buy phase one for, I don't know, we haven't figured out the pricing yet, but I don't know, maybe phase one's like $100 or something, but you have it for life. So, you don't have to keep paying.
Yeah.
And so we're looking into that. And then maybe we could approach a company that needs Mandarin learning and just be like, okay, buy, 100 units of the Mandarin Blueprint method and
totally
do it that way. We'll see. I found that working with big companies can sometimes be a bit frustrating, because like we tried to work with English First here in Chengdu for their teachers, so that their foreign teachers could learn Chinese. And it was just it's just this particular company, but dealing with the bureaucratic sort of side of things and the admin side of things was really frustrating. It was the kind of thing where it'd be like, okay, well, I'll go meet your students and we'll give them a demo. And I went there, and like the students didn't show up because the meeting got canceled and no one told us, and like stuff like that kept happening. And I was like, oh, this is rough. So we kind of moved away from that for a little bit, but we should really go back to it, because it's now we have a more powerful product. So we'll see.
Totally. I would say like approach like the JP Morgan Chase, if I don't know if they'd have like Chinese with like the locations, but like go big and be like, would you like us to be your in-house, like this is the program that you use, or ING Bank or something like that. Like, yeah, that'd be my thing. Go for it.
For JP Morgan Chase, so I should probably, or used to, because I should probably talk to him about that.
Totally.
Yeah, cool. All right, well then the final question is, if you were, imagine you're talking to somebody who's looking into learning Mandarin Chinese, and they say, all right, TJ, should I use Mandarin Blueprint? What would you say?
Man, I was actually kind of like dreading this question, because it sounds so trite to be the evangelical that's like, go for it. It's unlike anything you've ever used before. And like, I can guarantee, unless you went to like an alternative high school or school or something like that, it is unlike any language learning method that you've ever used before. And it will shift the way you think about learning languages. And you will learn that the way you were taught rote learning is so passe. It's so over. And it's incredible. And I really hope that I keep sprinkling it throughout the community with my comments, but it's like just go with the flow. It's never been done before, so you're going to try to resist it, and you're going to be like, well, wait, you have to do this, don't you have to do this? Just like go with the flow. And I think do it, go with the flow, have fun. That's my advice.
Fantastic. Well, TJ, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we'd like to check in with you after you finish the foundation course. So after you hit lesson complete on level 13, you should get an email from us saying, let's check in. So like, I'd love to hear how you feel after you've gone through some of the longer form content, and see what's going on there. So that'll be at the end of level 36. So I think you're in level 14 now. So keep it up,
I'll get there
through, and hopefully we can chat again. And so anybody interested in learning more, head to mandarinblueprint.com. And thanks again, TJ. 谢谢你观看我们的这个视频. If you found this video valuable and you'd like us to help you reach fluency and literacy in Mandarin Chinese as fast as possible without all the headache of traditional learning methods, just head to mandarinblueprint.com to learn more. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell below to be notified every time we release a new video. And of course, 保重.